Hello, collective listeners. On today's episode of the Samson Strength Coach Collective, we have Alex Cost. He is with the Delaware Bluecoats, the G League organization for the Philadelphia 76ers. I really love this episode. I mean, for me, selfishly, right, as a basketball guy, to speak to high-level basketball strength coaches, it's really nice because I get to just absorb all the knowledge. But, I mean, his discussion and what we talked about, I think, really would benefit all strength coaches. And he's just such a humble guy. You could tell immediately from the start. I really enjoyed it. I immediately told him after we finished the podcast, we have to connect in the future because he can teach a lot, and he seems like just a really cool dude. So I think you guys will really enjoy this episode. And as always, thank you for listening. What's going on, collective listeners? On today's episode of the Samson Strength Coach Collective, we have Alex Cost. Alex, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Connor. I'm excited to be here.
Absolutely. Hey, this is selfishly, this is a little bit more of a podcast for me. And I'm going to try to keep it off of just basketball specific training because obviously I'm a basketball strength coach, so I could really dive in way too deep. But I'll try to keep it more generic for the listeners and not be too selfish. But first of all, can you kind of just take us through your background in strength and conditioning? What got you into strength and conditioning, what your journey's been like, and then what you are currently doing now?
Yeah, of course. So, unlike any other strength coach, I grew up playing sports. I I played football, baseball, and basketball in high school, and as I'm sure you've heard before, you know, the dream dies of playing at the next level. So you try to figure out how you can get in,
Oh,
um,
yeah.
and like be a part of a team, right? And you don't necessarily want to do like business or like finance or anything like that. And I love being in the weight room, love playing sports. So learned about this thing called strength and conditioning. I graduated high school in about 2011, and we had a strength coach who was working with the Raiders. They worked with our football team, and we were sorry for like decades. Like I think in a 1 decade span, our football team won a total of like 8 games. Like we would like
Wow.
go winless every year. We brought him in for a summer, and we ended up going. I think we went like 8-4 and won a playoff game, and it was like we won the Super Bowl. And I was like, oh, so this is like actually something that can change like teams and like athletes and stuff. And that's what got me really interested. Our high school was actually, we were lucky enough to have a sports med program, so we were able to have like anatomy and like rehab kind of stuff. And we actually had student athletic trainers who worked with our football team, taped us, and do all that stuff. So I was lucky to be exposed to it and just like the human body and anatomy at a young age. So picked that, ran with it, went to junior college to kind of make some money, transferred down to San Diego State. And then when I was there for our capstone, we had to do an internship. So I reached out to everybody in the strength and conditioning department. Wasn't able to get one like through the SDSU strength and conditioning department, but I knew the head basketball coach or the head strength coach for the basketball team. So he was like, yeah, come in and you can just work with me. So I lucked out with that because that was the one team I wanted to work with. And was under him. His name's Randy Shelton. So I did my internship, absolutely loved it. So I just came back, went to grad school at San Diego State for a dual master's in exercise physiology and nutrition. Just kept volunteering and being around the team and getting to know the guys, and fell in love with it. COVID hit, and I'm sure as you know, like skeleton staff was a thing. So I ended up getting let go, but I'd worked my way up to an assistant role, so I had a little bit of some on my resume. I interned at a gym in San Diego called Fitness Quest 10 under a guy named Todd Durkin. If you're into football strength and conditioning, a lot of people know him because he works with Drew Brees. He worked with LT. So he would have like the Saints guys come out. That was a cool experience for me as well. And went like the private route for a little bit just to try to make money and like get my hands on guys. So during COVID, they were between strength coaches. I would just talk to the players and say, hey, like, I'm just going to buy equipment and like, let's just go to parks or parking lots, or like, let's just like get some work in because you guys can't go in the weight room. You don't even have a strength coach here. And like, you're not like, there's going to be a season. So we need to do something. So I ended up getting probably like 6 to 8 guys. We ended up finding like one gym that we could keep going back to. It's kind of like an outdoor gym at an apartment complex that one of the guys lived in. They were super cool, but I got basically a whole summer to be a pseudo head strength coach for the basketball team, which was really cool for me. And then like fast forward a year, I had gotten private clients. I was doing the thing, kind of just trying to network. I'd created an IG. I've never been a social media guy, but I got so bored during COVID. I was like, if I'm going to learn, I might as well just try to post it because, if you teach stuff, it helps you learn more. And then
Absolutely.
just like through networking on IG, I linked up with our head strength coach here at the Sixers, and through the APC course, I got a lot of friends in the field and networked really well. That's applied performance coach with Ramsey Nijum. I learned about a guy who's going to take the Delaware Blue Coats job. He turned it down to stay where he was going to be at, and I reached out to the head strength coach and was like, "Hey, I heard this position's still open." He said, "Send me your resume." This is all through IGDM. And then
That's classic.
"Yeah, okay, bet interview." So I interviewed a couple times and then was out here like 3 weeks later. It was crazy.
Wow, that's incredible. Oh my god, that's like okay. First of all, that goes to show like absolutely send the DM because I feel like a lot
Right.
of younger strength coaches I talk to are always like, well, I don't want to bother them. Like nothing really happens through DMs. Well, I mean, you got a whole job through DMs.
Yeah, straight up. And it's like you have to understand how to do it in a sense, right? Like you don't want to just pester people, but reaching out and introducing yourself and saying, "Hey, I'm young in the game and like I'd really like to learn how I could get to, the higher levels, like a Power Five school or a D1 school or the G League or the NBA." And most guys will give you the time of day to at least have a phone call, whether it's 5 to 10 minutes, just to get to know you, right? And then they can kind of recommend you for stuff that they know. But like if you're constantly in the same person's DMs, like asking for help, asking for advice, that's going to turn them off. But if check in once every few months or like once every 6 months, just like and the thing that I do is you always start it off with, "Hey, how are you doing?" Like you don't just ask for something,
Yep, yep.
right? And that's kind of like it's hard with strength coaches because you have to put so many hours in the trenches and like so many unpaid hours that you get super hungry and you just want to know where the opportunities are, but you still have to stay humble in a sense of like these guys who are here did it too. So not it like I hate the earn your stripes thing, but you have to understand just kind of where the industry is as a whole and kind of how you need to go about asking and figuring out where these positions are available.
Well, I agree with you. I'm half and half on the earn your stripes piece too. Because I had some rough internships. I had some experiences that were subpar, if you could say.
Right.
But I mean, at the same time too, though, like to me, it's if it's a quality internship, you still have to, or quality work like you've undergone, like you still have to make your mistakes, and that's how you learn the most, right? And you still have to put the time in, and exactly like you said, all those guys have put the time in as well too. So, I think that's a good way to look at it. But I mean, that's first of all, we will put that disclaimer out there. Do not inundate Alex with DMs, okay? And don't ask him, "Hey, how are you?" every single day, all right?
Yeah.
but uh,
Hey, I
but
try to get back
do
to
it in a smart way.
everybody, right? Because like in this industry, my one motto for our industry is just pay it forward, right? Like everybody wants
Absolutely.
to be where you are, so like I try to pay it forward as much as I can. I try to help people out. I'll talk to people. I'll like FaceTime people. I help people with their CSCS if they want help, and just like kind of every aspect of it. But it has to be like when I can do it. Like I mean, even you and I, like we're in the industry, and like how long did it take us to even schedule this
Oh
podcast
yeah.
is like two
Yep.
and a half,
Exactly.
3 weeks. Like it's just you can't like just make it happen because stuff happens. A guy can't lift today, so he's got to lift during this other time when you scheduled it to be with somebody else, or like there's a team meeting or a random event that you got to go to, or like people have families and like maybe it's something with the
Yep.
family happened. So it's like the fine line between persistency and like you said, like inundation.
Oh yeah. No, and I mean you were correct too. I even told you, hey, I'm going to be on a little bit late because our women's group is running late today. I
Yeah,
mean that's
right.
the nature of the job for sure.
And I was
Yeah.
like, oh,
Well,
bet I'm about to go hoop for one more game.
he's just that's why I tried to send the text out because for the listeners, he told me he was playing basketball beforehand. I was like, all right, let me see if I can get this out so he can get one more run in before he's got to hop off. So
There you go. There you go.
to touch on that very briefly, because I do think when I was thinking about it when we talked about it, what type of player are you when you play basketball?
I'm a poor man's Clay Thompson. I'm strictly a 3 and D guy. I'll get buckets, but I will dribble less than 10 times. And like I'm not good. I have zero handles. I get picked all the time. But I like to try on defense, but I also get lazy. I mean, who doesn't in pickup? Like
Yep.
sometimes I'll just sit in the corner and just call for the ball.
So the reason I bring this up is because I mean I texted you. I obviously knew the answer to that question, but I texted you and I was like, yeah, I'm a rebound, pass, and foul guy. Like that's 100% my style. All effort. I know as soon as I shoot and I miss, I'm getting pulled immediately.
Yeah,
So it's all going to be effort. Wholly. And just from looking at your Instagram and your body of work, what always cracks me up is I feel like with basketball strength coaches specifically, is the guys who foul and the guys who are the hustle guys are the ones who are more of like the old school, less technology kind of group, and
right.
the guys who are the 3 and D, and who I think are the smarter ones because again, they just get to shoot and they get to they get to have fun while playing instead of going completely out of breath or more of the science based technology kind of guys. I don't know if you've seen the trend, but I've definitely noticed it.
I mean, I didn't have a connection or any GPS tracker on me, but that'd be interesting to do.
I'd be running 40 miles per game and getting
Yeah,
absolutely
right.
nowhere.
Lot
So
of high intensity X cells, G cells for you.
yeah, and with my current body weight, high intensity.
Yeah.
So, um, no, but I one thing that you brought up that I really do love is the paying it forward aspect because I do feel like being on the other side of it now, when I'm not the person reaching out, when I'm the person responding, it can get tough because again, you do get inundated with things, stuff pops up like you said, But we were even talking about Stephen Brindle, another strength coach within the NBA organizations, like he was somebody who was pivotal in me getting my internship with the Jets, and then the Jets led to University of Tennessee, and it all rolled from there. And that was somebody who I didn't work directly with his teams. Really, I kind of would help out with basketball every once in a while. I was really more with Christy Bartlett at the time, but
Hmm.
that's somebody who I think saw that I was willing to put in the work and helped me out. And so to me, he's always one of those people who I'm like, I do need to pay it forward because of people I've had help me, such as Steven. So I think that piece is just so important to strength and conditioning as a whole.
Yeah, exactly. And it also just goes to show like when you're doing an internship, it's not just about like the X's and O's, right? You'll
Mm,
learn how to program, you'll learn how to coach, you'll learn how to like do stuff in the trenches. But at the same time, if you're not developing a relationship with either your superior or your athletes, right? Like if you just come in to get your work done and leave, then that's not somebody I'm going to be like, yeah, this is who I think you should hire because I don't even really know who they are, right? Like, I'm not saying you got to go out and hang out with them after work every day because we know you have to put in long hours, but at the same time, like, it's something I always do with my athletes is like, hey, what would you do if you aren't a basketball player? Or what would you do if you didn't do this, right? Like, try to get to know them a little bit. And it just helps develop a
yeah.
little bit of trust. And it shows that you're not a robot, right? Like, you're not just here to write programs and do it for either like clout or like nobody does this for money because we all know that this isn't the highest paying profession, but there are a lot of really, really cool perks that come with it in a sense.
Yep.
But yeah, like when you're doing an internship, it's multifactorial, right? Like it's not just programming, it's not just research, it's not just coaching. And I think people get hyper focused on those things that they forget that the people who they're interning for are the ones who are going to be recommending them for other jobs.
Absolutely. And, it just that hits home to me because I've had some interns in the past who, one of them literally just texted me a couple minutes ago, and he was on the podcast before. Like I see him now as a GA, like, it's almost like my hands on the glass, like, like looking like,
Right.
oh man, I miss you,
Yeah.
but because they developed that relationship, but they also did with the athletes as well, too. And it was an internship, but became an assistant strength coach really at the end of the day, so I mean,
Yeah.
that's when, whoever called me, I was like, look, I'll put my career on the line for this guy because I know that he would do a fantastic job. And I mean, that's what takes it to that next level every single time.
Yeah, exactly. And like that's kind of what I did at San Diego State. Like it started out as an internship and he straight up told me he's like, "Look, you'll be a fly on the wall like, classic stuff, clean weights, re-rack, set up, do all this kind of stuff." Like but then I just kept coming back after it ended because I was like, "Look, I love this. Like I love basketball." And eventually I started to get to work with freshmen. I started to get to work with the underclassmen. I got to work with rotational players. And like this is all over the course of like 3 years. But then some of the guys that I worked with end up going to the league. And then now I can
Yeah.
talk to them. And the Sixers actually traded for one of them last year, and he came back to the facility, and he's like, "Cost, no way." I'm like, "I guess we're here." And it's like
That's
it was just
awesome.
a cool full circle moment for me. But it's like you have to love it at the same time. But I developed trust with Randy and the person who was my boss, and so he was like, "Hey, like I'll give you a little bit more on your plate." And it's not like, "Oh, your internship is October to March and then you're just done with it," right? Like, I mean,
Yep.
you can go do that if you want. Like some people in my cohort went to like stretch lab and they're like, all I did was clean weights and wipe down yoga mats. And like, I never even stretched any of the client. I mean, it's a stretch lab, but like, okay, well, did you get anything out of it? Right. Like you also have to make sure that what you're doing is something that you're going to actually benefit from, because it could turn you like off of the whole profession, right? Like
Oh
if
yeah.
you do something like that and you're like, well, I don't want to do this, and then you're wondering like, why did I even get this bachelor's? Like I don't want to be a personal trainer, or like I don't want to go down this, because it gets to be a little dicey sometimes because positions are so few and far between that you have to seek out and know what you're getting yourself into.
That's the scary piece for sure. I mean, and I remember one of my specific internships. I was like, all right, like I'm going to give it one more, like just to make sure. But if this is who I'm going to become, like I don't want to do this,
Right.
like
Yeah.
because it was very similar setup like you were talking about. And I mean, it does get scary because it's like almost the same thing on the coaching side, right? If you're a basketball coach, it's I mean, your options are basketball, collegiate basketball coach, professional basketball coach, or teach English in high school
Right.
basketball coach. I
Yeah.
mean, it's very small. So I think it's scary, and I think that's really important for both parties involved, is understand, one, you can make or break somebody's love for the field, and then two, as an intern, like you have to make sure you get the most out of the experience and stick with it and try to go to places that are going to develop you as well too.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I couldn't have said
Yeah.
better.
So, okay, so something you mentioned in your intro that I was really interested in, is you said you have a dual master's in exercise physiology and nutrition.
Correct.
Is that correct? Okay, excellent. So, I mean, nutrition to me is the number one game changer. I
Mm,
mean, I don't, how I always organize it is you have to breathe and eat to live, and lifting weights is way at the bottom of that category.
mhm.
So how has that helped you throughout your career, getting that master's in nutrition?
Yeah, so working in collegiate and even like in the G League NBA setting, I kind of tell guys like with a hierarchy in terms of recovery or even like getting your body right. Like if we have a pyramid, well, let's say we're in the collegiate setting. So this is what I say. If you have tests and homework assignments that make up 80% of your grade in a class, right? Like a normal college class. Let's consider that nutrition and sleep. So all the extra credit, the one group project that's maybe going to be like 15% of your grade, like if we can consider that like ice baths, foam rolling, Theragun, compression, whatever, like if you don't hit your two main blocks, you're still going to fail this class. So
Yeah,
if you're not sleeping right and if you're not getting the right nutrition in, you're you're going to fail. Your body's going to fail. You're going to fail the class. You're going to take it over again. You're not going to get to where you want to go. So it helps me a lot to kind of tell these guys. And when I'm first with somebody, I'll say, hey, mess around with it. Don't eat before practice like you normally do, and tell me how you feel after. And then maybe go and eat something before practice and then tell me how you feel. And like for me, it's kind of how I coach too. Like I'll let an athlete do a movement when I don't really know them to see how they move and see how they self-organize before I start to cue them, because I want them to actually understand like what the difference is, right? And
yeah,
like this is right and this is wrong. And with nutrition it helps a lot because once they start seeing the number on the scale go up or down, right? Body fat percentage go up or down, they feel cut, right? Like a lot of college coaches like post their guys, right? Like this was June, this is August, like going into the season. Like when they can visualize that and see it in a mirror, then they're like, oh, so this is like what we're talking about, right? Like this isn't just
yeah,
the difference between eating pizza instead of like a salad, right? Like it's not a one meal thing, but this is like over the course of a semester if you like talk about it like with the grades, right, in a class. And to me, some guys really care and I'm like, okay, well now we can go down like different metabolism pathways and I can tell you like these are some theories that are out there like fuel for the work required or like glycogen threshold theories in the muscle where like you don't have to always carb load, right? If you're somebody that doesn't play in games, you probably don't have to carb load before a game, right? And if you're somebody that does, then maybe you should. Okay, well that was too much. I felt like shit, coach. I don't want to do that again. Okay, well maybe we just taper it back a little bit and we can find where like your sweet spot is because everybody's different. Like I talk to them and I'll say, hey, what did you eat growing up as a kid? And somebody will tell me, hey, what did you eat growing up as a kid? And they'll tell me, and I said, they're totally different. I said, do you think that you two were going to metabolize food the same way and utilize this energy the same way? Probably not, right? So maybe we should have a little bit of a different diet. And it is hard to individualize it. Obviously, like I'm not a dietitian, and in certain states I could make recommendations, but
Yeah.
I can't prescribe a diet, right? But I think just getting them to start thinking about it that way just helps a lot more because then they can feel it. And a lot of athletes won't change anything until they feel it or until they see it in a mirror. And so
Yeah.
I think it helps me a lot because I can make recommendations, I can talk to them, and then we can kind of go a little bit deeper if we need to. But then also I can say, hey, this is why I want you to drink this smoothie. And I've had a guy in the G League, he says, I only eat chicken fingers, French fries, and mac and cheese. I'm like, okay, well, first of all, you're in the G League, so like maybe that's why, because you were a good college player. Like maybe we need to do something about this. And I convinced him to start drinking smoothies, just post practice smoothies. Like I'd make them for everybody on the team. I said, hey, do you, and full disclosure, I ask every athlete if they have allergies before. And so obviously I
Yep.
modify smoothies, but I asked him, do you like spinach? And he said, no, I hate spinach. I said, well, you've eaten probably like 10 pounds of spinach this year because I put them in every single one of your smoothies. And then he left. So he won a G League Showcase MVP, got a 10-day contract. He was like, okay, this is obviously working. He got out of the G, was in Mexico for a year, came back. I think he might even be with us. And he DMs me and says, Coach Koss, I've been drinking that smoothie every single day. And I think it's one of the
Wow.
reasons that I'm still like playing basketball and like in it and like the mobility stuff that we were doing because you like actually talked to me as a person and not just like another athlete and gave up. Like I think that's one of the reasons. So it's just little stuff like that. Like it shows that you care about them on a personal level, whether you can individualize their nutrition or not. But the fact that you can talk to them about it just opens up different avenues of conversation or different types of conversation that you could have to the point where they might text you randomly and say, hey, I'm at this restaurant, what should I get?
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, well, hey, like now we're taking steps in the right direction because you're just conscious of it, right? Like you might
The
still
face
get chicken tenders and fries, but like at least you're thinking
yeah.
about it.
The FaceTimes is for me. It's like the FaceTime, right? And like they're not even like at their actual face. It's just
Yeah,
them pointing at a freezer section. They're like, "What should I get?"
yeah,
I was like, "All right."
right,
So,
exactly. Hey, but I'd rather you do that than not. So like,
exactly.
yeah, and I think that shows a lot about like trust and buy-in in you as a coach, right? Because now it's like a personal thing. It's not like they are utilizing you as a resource, but they care enough to at least FaceTime you or call you instead
Yep.
of just text.
Yeah. It's so interesting the approach that you took and to say, hey, like, it's like almost like not to compare athletes to kids, right? But like if you know something's going to be moderately hot, you're like, yeah, go touch it, see how it feels,
Right.
and to say like, hey, don't eat before this practice and see how it feels. Like, I've really never heard of that approach before. My typical approach is, I mean, I guess it'd be a little bit more authoritarian, I guess you could say, where it's more on the end of if you have somebody who you want to lean out a little bit, it's like, just get there first, see how you feel. And if you really don't feel good, we can modify from there.
Mhm.
But, you and I both know that typically if they get to that goal space, like they're in a good spot and they feel better, they're like, oh, yeah, you were right. But I've never heard that approach before. I mean, how did you kind of start to develop that?
I mean, first of all, the first thing I would ask a guy when it comes to nutrition, body composition, I say, hey, what do you like playing at?
Yeah.
Hey, when I was in high school, I liked playing this. Oh, but I went to college. I think I lifted too much. I got too much weight. I lost a step or something like this. I'll say, okay, well, hey, this is why I think you should actually play it this way because let's just say you're a bigger guard, right? Like we need you to switch on fives, or like four or fives. Like you're a taller, bigger guard. We're gonna need you on the block. We need you to like be a hard nosed defender. And also, and I'm gonna be blunt, you can't really shoot. So like
Yeah.
you attack the rim a lot, right? Like a lot of your game is played inside the paint. So if you're just going to lose weight just to look cut, then you're going to get thrown around. So this is why I think you should do it. And then we can kind of get into a range of like maybe 3 to 5 pounds and like a 1 to 2% body fat range where we can really hone in on like, okay, this is really where I feel strong but fast, right? This is where I feel strong and bulky, and and like I'm a step behind. Or like if you really want to change your game over the summer, right? Like maybe we cut and you just focus on things that haven't been your game in the past. So I again, like I like to ask them, what do you like to play at? Because most guys when they get to me, they've played in high school, they've played at least a year or two or college, so they have an idea of what weight they kind of are the best at or the bounciest at. And then from there, I'll try to kind of find a range of where they are. Cause I've had some guys who haven't played, they've gained like 20 pounds in the season. And
Oh yeah.
it's not like, oh, he's just fat now. It's like we just lift a lot and you don't play that much. And so he's like, Coach, I'm way too big. And I'm like, all right, step on the scale. I'm like, yeah, yeah. So
Yep.
let's stop.
Yep.
Like let's start running and jumping and like being more basketball players. And it's always a give and a take. And I think by asking them, you're giving them a sense of autonomy over their own training. And like
Yep.
that's what I really like to do because I think it gives athletes a lot more buy-in to your program because it's not just you telling them, here's your A block, here's your B block, here's your C block, right? Go do this on the treadmill, go do this cardio. And it really like they're like, oh, well, I actually have a say in a sense of like what I'm eating or what I'm doing or kind of even the workout that I'm going to do. So mentally I can get there a little bit easier because I feel like I'm controlling it.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's not even something that you feel like, it's proven by research. I
Right.
mean, seriously, I don't know. You hit on a very, very topic. It's very close to my heart, right? Because my master's is in sports psych. So autonomy is one of the biggest things that we learned about, and self-determination theory and how to apply that within the weight room. I mean, the research on it is incredible because it shows like, okay, even this was on novice putters, right? People who've never putted before, they got to only choose the color of their golf ball.
Hmm.
And so that was it. The people who got to choose the color of their golf ball did better at learning how to putt than those who didn't. And then they took it a step further and they had, okay, you don't get to choose the color of your golf ball anymore, but you're going to sit in the waiting room. And then some people get to choose what painting they're going to look at in the waiting room, and some people just get to look at whatever painting's there. The people who got to choose what painting they looked at in the waiting room did better at learning how to putt, because it is seriously at college athletics, and I mean in athletics in general, is such a controlled environment for these athletes, so that as soon as they get any type of say and any type of autonomy, like you're saying, they're going to buy in so much more. And the research shows time and time again that they're really going to be invested in the program. And it doesn't have to be crazy. Like you can let them choose small things that make a massive difference.
Yeah, and like sometimes I'll just say like, "Hey, how do we feel today?" Right? And if everybody's like,
Yeah.
"Oh, I feel like crap," I'll say, "Okay, well then let's just do regeneration day." And like
Yep.
maybe we were gonna do that anyway because I knew that they were gonna feel like crap. But even like them like having like being able to say it first, and I'll be like, "Oh, well, we were gonna go
Yep.
heavy today, but like actually let's just like." We'll foam roll. We'll do some like banded mobility, and like we'll do some motion is lotion type stuff. And it's like, all right, good. Well, now I haven't bought into this a little bit more. But again,
Yep.
like it's on a daily basis. How do you feel, right?
Yeah. No.
And it's a little question that goes a long way because I feel like, and I don't know if you can attest to this, but coming out of college, it's like I am an elite programmer. I know how to periodize. I know how to periodize. I know how to program, and like I have an annual plan written out, and we're gonna have superhuman athletes because of this.
Yep.
But you don't account for
Yep.
everything else, right? And it's like it looks so pretty in this Excel doc or Bridge or Team Builder, whatever you're using, and then when the day comes and you want to do, and you do want to lift heavier, you do want to have like a harder day, and they don't want to. You're like, oh well, we didn't get better today. Like, oh man, like I couldn't do this. But I think that being in the industry is something that like just adaptability, but also like knowing how to phrase stuff and work with your
Yep.
athletes so that you're still creating buy-in and being like, okay, well now we can pivot, we can shift these 2 days or swap these weeks or whatever it is based on what's going on in the season or their life or school or home or whatever.
Yep. That's quite literally, I mean, every collegiate basketball strength coach right now just hit their 20 hours. And I mean, we are, like it's week 1.5 of practice.
Hmm.
Everybody's exhausted, like, and this is literally exactly what I did today. Like we had a shorter lift already planned, and I was like, all right, I'm gonna take care of you guys here in the lift today. Give me good effort for this short amount of time, and then they rolled right through and they're like, oh, thanks, man. They say all the time, that's love. That's
Yeah,
love.
right,
And I'm like,
exactly.
oh, hey, it was already planned. All right.
Yeah,
So, but you're 100% correct, because if you do phrase it in a way that you mentioned, hey, I care about you. I understand. I hear you. I'm listening to you. And we can give and take. It doesn't mean if you don't love lifting, we're not going to lift every single day, but I can meet you in the middle on certain days. You know how to kind of go with that process. My favorite trick is to give them a weight range, like 30
Yeah.
to 40 pounds, and like what's the massive difference really going to be in that weight range? But all of
Right.
a sudden they're like, yeah, I'll go 35. And I'm like, yeah, hey, that's
Yeah.
pretty good there. And then that usually kind of
Right.
gives them that autonomy piece too. Yeah,
No, 100%. And like one thing that I think helps me with that is I tell everybody at the beginning of the year, I'm like, hey, like this is one of the standards here with us. And now that we've had success, it kind of just backs it up. I can be like, hey, like we're post
yeah,
game lifting. Like it's just something that we do because we play 50 games in like like a 3.5 month range. And it's pretty much one of our only times to load you guys. But I will work with you guys because basically when we get in season, we're either post game lifting or we're doing, like some Viper work that's lighter, some med ball work to be explosive, or like some running and jumping. So we don't really touch that much weight outside of those lifts. But just because
yeah,
they have that mindset, it's, I think, a little bit easier for them to also know, like, okay, well, we know we're going to lift on these days. And then sometimes if we're on a win streak, I'll be like, hey, like, no post game lift today, and like they'll
yeah,
be
yeah.
so hyped. Like
Like,
it, like it'll be
you
a
go
Friday night.
crazy.
I'll be like, all right, like you guys are good. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh man, that's awesome. No, no, no. I mean, seriously, I think that's a massive part to the success, like you're saying. I mean, it's and especially with looking at the differences between a professional and collegiate level versus high school level, like the frequency and the amount of times that you have to play is drastically different,
Mhm.
right? And so for you to fit that training time in, obviously you have to set that standard. But once that standard is set and everybody else is bought in, they come in and it's like, all right, well, I'm not getting out of this. There's
Yeah,
no like magic words I can say that all of a sudden I'm not post game lifting
right.
anymore. They just buy in, they fall in, and everything usually works itself out. So
Exactly.
that's awesome. Well, that was another kind of question I had as well too. Is you have experience at the pro level, you have experience at the college level, you have experience at the private level. Like what has been the difference between those? I guess what's your favorite one you've worked with as well too. I'm kind of just curious about the parallels between those three levels that you've been at.
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think, let's see, that like the biggest difference I would say is motivation. Like private, it's
Mm,
like people, it's a weird like enigma in the private sector where people pay you but then feel like they have to come do it, and like that
mm,
actually, like James Clear writes about it in Atomic Habits, right? Like if you want to get in shape, like pay somebody, and then every time you don't go you're losing money, so now it's like, well, that's just a motivation factor. But it's harder to get people to be motivated. You're also with them for less time because it's like, all right, maybe you want to come in 3 to 4 times a week. Like, well, I don't know what you're doing the other 100+ hours of the week, and so if you're not hitting your goals, like, yeah, I could make you sweat, right? Like I can work on a hip, a shoulder, like I can make you feel better, but it like really ingraining like discipline and consistency and all that stuff, which is like something every like all people struggle with it at times. But the the aspect of like working with certain clients over like a year to 2 years, and it's like, look, I we have to change something because like nothing is going on, and it's
yeah,
like some people just like it for the community aspect, right? Or like they just like to get the sweat to balance out the other aspects of their life, and that's fine. um, at the college level, like the motivation is higher, but then there's also politics and there's class, and it's a little bit more militant in a sense. And you
mm,
have the guys who are like, they're gym rats. They always want to be in the gym. They don't know how to take days off. They don't know how to rest. And then you have guys who are like, I'm on the basketball team. Like, this is the coolest thing in the world. And like, they don't know how to get motivated or do stuff, right? And then at the pro level, specifically the G League level, like, motivation's usually pretty high because it's like you can taste it. Like, it's right there.
yeah,
Like, if you get a 10-day contract with an NBA team, you might get paid like 150K for 10 days. And like, yeah, it's not a mill, but like, that's a good yearly
150K. It's pretty
salary for
nice.
10 days. You're probably not going to risk injury. You might not see the court, which is fine, but like you could also work to get an NBA contract. When my first year in the G, we had the most 10 days. We had like four guys get two-way contracts, and then we had a couple guys even sign NBA contracts. And it's like
Wow.
people seeing that, and the motivation's like, oh, I'm there. Like, here we go. Like, and being in the G, it's great. It's the NBA, but it's not super glorious. Like, we fly commercial like a lot of colleges. We like, I bet a lot of Power Five schools have way more glorious
Yeah.
facilities, travel better, stay in better places, have better equipment. Like the G League is the Gatorade League, but it's also kind of a running joke if you work in it, like it's called the grind league, like for everybody involved, because everybody wants to get to the next level. So it's not even like the players are motivated. Like I want to be an NBA strength coach someday. Like our coaches want to work in the NBA. Our player dev guys want to work in the NBA. Like our director of basketball operations wants to work in the NBA. Our trainers, our PT, right? Like so everybody is kind of like bought in. They want to win. They want to show that they're ready to go take the next step. And so I would say because of that, like you can have a little bit, not like more structure, but like you can do a little bit more at the G League level because you don't have classes, right? Like these guys are usually away from their families too. So they're free and they're down to do whatever. I can have extra mobility sessions. I can have lifts. We can come back for shooting. Like we can do all that kind of stuff. Whereas in college, it's a grind, right? Like when finals roll around and like all that stuff comes through and like you get to go home for the holidays and then you come back and you're like, ah, like that was nice. Like,
Yep.
and
Yep.
like, I mean, the same thing kind of happens around All-Star break, but to be honest, I would say like that's probably the biggest difference that I've found personally. And it's like, I guess I would say the biggest difference if I'm just comparing college and the G League is like in college, you can actually like make guys different. Like you can turn like guys or girls into different athletes or different people
Yeah.
because you can have them for so much longer. Like usually the attention to detail in college can be a little bit more in a sense because you can have these more like militant type workouts where everybody's doing the same thing, everybody's bought in, everybody like you can do Nordic hamstring curls because you have enough athletes to like hold ankles or like sometimes in the G it's just me running a session. Like I don't have an assistant strength coach, I don't have an intern. Like some organizations don't even allow volunteers. So I have to go around and like check form, but also like kind of change weights and like do all this
Yeah.
different stuff in a weight room. I might have guys on the court doing court work or like med ball type stuff on the court. So I can't really have super high attention to detail during my main lifts where I'm going to have maybe 6 to 12 guys where it's just me. But I can have somebody come in after practice to do specific work with them. I can meet somebody on the road because there's not much to do and I can do specific work with them. Whereas in college, usually guys, I mean, everybody now just plays video games. Like they bring their systems on
Yeah.
the road and it's just wild to me. Like the first, I was like, you guys
I
bring your PlayStations and Xboxes to like
all right.
go for a walk. I mean, like,
I'm
what
in the
are we
same
doing?
camp. I've never. I saw the first time I saw somebody bring a PS5 with them. I was like, "What in the world are we doing?" No, I
Yeah,
agree.
no, exactly. But I mean, like, I would say that's probably the biggest aspect because, and it's almost like not like a running joke, but at the NBA level, like you have 3 to 4 strength coaches on a staff who are like only there and they only have like 3 to 4 players. So you can get extremely individualized, you can get extremely specific, right? At the G League level, I can kind of try to bucket guys a little bit more like you can at the college level in a sense, but at college, you're generally lifting the full team at once, or you might have like a squad before, a squad after practice. But there is a lot more frequency of like full team lifts in college. So motivation would be one, but then also like individualization would be another one.
Yeah.
It's a little bit tougher in the G League. At the NBA level, you can do it a little more. Also, just kind of access to technology. Certain colleges may have it. At SCSU, we didn't have force plates. We didn't have like tendos. I bought a Flex Stronger from GymAware and I brought that down to Delaware. I have another GymAware unit down there. I have force plates. I can bring guys up to Philly and test them on like Kangatech, Delos. Um, what else do we have? We have like Alter G. We have underwater treadmill. I mean, like it's an NBA facility, so we have a lot of stuff up here, but it's also 45 minutes away. So
Yeah.
there's like it's like you have access but you don't, and then when you're on the road in the G, I mean it's like you don't have much, right? You're traveling commercial, you need your bag to be under 50 pounds. So like what are your big ticket items? With like one thing I love is a tidal tank or like a water bag because then you can just empty out the water and it's
It's
basically
pretty nice.
weightless, right?
That's good. Yeah. Yeah.
And then you could fill it up to like 40 pounds if you want to, or I like to do more like 15 to 20 and use it for like perturbation, kind of like uh, more like balance training, like pregame and stuff, just to get like
Yeah.
stabilizer muscles going. But yeah, so it's a long-winded answer. Like motivation is the biggest difference between the three, but then when you get to like college versus pro, like it's the varying levels of individualization that you can get, right? Like, can you work with a player one on one? Do you have to bucket a certain like certain athletes, or do you work with certain like position groups at the same time?
Yeah, it's fun. It's funny you bring up the gym equipment availability. I used to have a series on TikTok I do, which was like hotel gym reviews.
Yeah,
And I mean, almost always they're awful.
yeah,
I mean, like, and then one time we went to the Hilton in Austin, Texas, and I was like, this is actually in a full rack. They had like the shred mill and everything. I was like, this is I could set up camp here. I'll stay here forever. So,
right.
but
Yeah, but then you're
um,
like, oh, well, we get some real work done, and you're like, oh, well, we have a game tomorrow, so like I can't.
yeah,
Because these guys are just going to be
exactly.
sores. But it's like, all right, maybe I could do, I don't know, like some lighter
I
stuff
just
that's like cool with the equipment, but like it's like, oh, it's great, but I can't even really utilize it like that.
it
Like
doesn't even matter. Yeah.
the guys are going to be showered by
The,
the time we get back post game, so I'm not going to lift them at the hotel. Like nobody's going to want to do
yep.
that.
That's when I just find our walk on who loves lifting. And I'm like, all right, you want to do a little 10 by 10 action today?
Right?
He's like, yeah, yeah, sure. So,
Exactly.
yeah. What thought came to mind for me when you're talking about the collegiate levels, I do feel like from a professional standpoint, it's harder to understand the scope of time that you have with that athlete as well too, because on a collegiate level, the transfer portal makes it a little more difficult, but at the end of the day, most of the time I've got you for 4 years,
Yeah.
so if we do have a bad day, it doesn't, I feel like, get to me that much, because it's like, all right, we got time to develop, like we can continue to work together. I don't know if you feel the pressure of that, knowing you have less time with that specific athlete, because yes, somebody may frustrate me today, but you know what, we're gonna be back tomorrow, and we're gonna keep stacking days, and building upon this relationship and getting to know each other a little bit better. Whereas, somebody may get traded, somebody may get cut immediately. Do you feel a pressure with that short window?
Yeah, I mean, it's like you have to basically treat everybody the same, but not, because especially the G League level, it's like you have two-way guys, you have guys on assignment, and they're obviously higher priority guys, but you can't like it's almost known but not spoken about, right? Like when guys like that come
Yeah,
down, they get more time in the training room, they get more table time, they get priority to shooting times, So it's like guys know, but you try not to make it so that there's a hierarchy, I guess, is what I would say.
yeah,
But yeah, like there's also a lot more pressure from like a front office position of, hey, we drafted this guy, and he's going to be on a two-way, or he's going to be like our 14th, 15th guy on the roster, and we expect him to be ready to play at the NBA level in a year or two, right? Or we expect him to put on X amount of pounds because he looks small. And then it's like, okay,
mhm,
well, yeah, I mean, he's also playing 35 minutes, and we have 50 games in like 4 months, and we don't get like breakfast and lunch and dinner cooked for us down at the G League level. The most that I can do is make a post practice smoothie, and I
yep,
mean, like you could make it 1,000 calories, but like guys are gonna turn that
yeah,
down 10 out of 10
100%,
times. They'd rather have something that then like I'd rather give somebody like a 400 to 500 calorie that has like 30 to 50 grams of protein, because they'll actually drink it. And then
yep,
on the road, like you got to cater at home, like we have catering, so it's not like they're not eating, but they don't have access to that kind of stuff. And then again, it goes back to, it's almost like the private sector, where it's like, all right, well, I'm with you, I can give you this one meal, we're sponsored by Gatorade like every other G League team, and we have a million Gatorade protein bars and like all that kind of stuff, but that gets like, you're not eating those every
it gets
single
boring
day.
quick.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly,
yeah,
right.
100%,
So then that's kind of like where it's a push and pull. Like, okay, well, if you want this guy to get bigger, like, can I cater more food? Because I don't know what
yep,
this guy's eating. I can make a recommendation and say, hey, this is a meal prep guy that we've worked with the past 2 years. But if he doesn't want to do it, then like what am I supposed to do, right? Like I could have the best
yeah,
like relationship with him, but ultimately I can't put the food in his mouth, right? You can take a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. Like I could even send the food to him, and he might not even be eating it. I don't know,
yep. Oh no! Hey, trust me, the
right?
trash can for the shakes afterwards. I don't. Sometimes you don't want to look,
No,
because you're like, all right, I don't even want to know.
yeah. I mean, it
No,
got
I
to the
mean,
point
but
last year where I was straight up like, look, I'm not going to make these if you guys don't want them. And like 4 or 5 guys didn't want them. I said, okay, I'm not going to make them for you guys anymore.
yeah,
Like
yeah,
if you
it's
randomly want one
100%.
one day, just ask me. But we're throwing money away. And to me, like I hate throwing food away just from like the philosophical like person aspect of
Yep.
that, of like people don't have access to this and you're just getting it and throwing it away. So like, is there different fruit that I could get that you would like, right? Like some guys like a more like tropical, like peach, mango, strawberry, where some guys like just the normal like triple berry Costco blend. And so I've tried to individualize it a little bit. Like, do you like peanut butter? Do you not? Do you want vanilla or chocolate protein? And like, it makes my life suck because I have to make like 4 different batches of smoothies. But I'd rather do that than like have these like half the team just turning down
100%.
smoothies, you know?
I think you're just bringing back my whole first year here at App. Like
Right?
it's just like I'm like, what do you mean you guys don't like chocolate smoothies? Like, and
Yeah.
every single one of them's like, I hate chocolate protein powder. I'm like, what? Like that'd be the only kind I drank growing up, and
Right.
you just cracking me up. You hit me on another personal level there, but I mean, but that goes back to the autonomy piece as well too, right? They also are going to be more likely, even if it's not something that they love, right? But you find something that they like, and they know,
Mm,
hey, Alex is still looking out for me. He really wants to make sure I'm getting something, so I can meet him here and drink this smoothie. It's a small thing, but those things add
exactly.
up like
Yep.
endlessly. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm sure
Right.
you've
I
seen
mean,
it. It
think
stacks up.
like if it's a 500 calorie smoothie, if you're having that, like probably not 7 days a week, but let's say 5 days a week, that's what, 2,500 calories a week times four. That's an extra 10,000 calories a month. That's like 3 pounds. So
Yep.
like that will add up over time. And like, I know you're burning a bunch of calories out there on the court, but think of how much more you're burning if you're not taking this. And so like sometimes doing simple math with these guys like that is also a big factor in nutrition, right? Like it's not this one smoothie, it's this one smoothie every day over the course of the season, or
Yep.
five, like
No,
whatever days we're together and have practice and I make them, you know?
it's a massive difference maker. Like we for our weight gain guys, what we do is apple juice with a little bit of cider carb mixed in it too. And
Mhm.
that's an extra 250 at the end of the day. And I remember people were like, what does that even matter? And
Yeah.
exactly like you said, if that stacks up, I mean, like for us it's a pound and a half, but I mean, if that's what ultimately I'm looking for you to gain an extra pound and a half, because I don't want you to put on bad weight. So I mean,
Yeah.
that helps us meet our goal right there.
Exactly.
And so, one thing I am curious about, not even just from a nutrition piece, maybe like mobility, extra work kind of guys, like what's your approach for those guys who aren't necessarily bought in? You really are kind of button heads with them. How do you approach that situation with those players?
So I'll go and like, my biggest thing is I love the game. I love basketball. I'll watch film and be like, this is what you're not good at, and this is why
Yeah,
you're not good at it. And it may or may not be the reason they're not good at it. But I know for a fact that if you can't get into left hip internal rotation, you're not going to be able to jab left and come back out explosively because you can't even load your hip. So I can say, look, you always have trouble going left back to right. So this is something that is going to help you. And I can, just loving the game and knowing how people move and how the game moves, I will create mobility drills that will get them and feel like we're doing something that's basketball oriented. Like I'm not just saying, hey, let's just statically stretch your groin. It could be a part of it,
yeah,
right? Like, hey, maybe you just shortened on that side, so you can't really get into your left hip. Maybe that's part of our mobility program. But we had a player who kept falling down, like really amazing basketball player. He's on a two-way somewhere else, kept falling down. He's like a bigger guy. He'd get into the lane. He would always like get super low and fall down. I'm like, dude, we got to fix this. Like, you're on the other end of the spectrum. You are hypermobile. You can access degrees of motion that not everybody else can. So how can we do this? Well, let's get you in these positions and let's work on balance. Let's put you in like deep hip flexion, deep hip internal rotation. And I'm just going to tell you to hold it, and I'm going to give you perturbations, or I'm going to tell you to pulse, or I'm going to give you water to mimic it. And some guys
yeah,
might be like, "Oh, well, hey, I'm used to doing something on a Bosu ball." I said, have you ever seen a Bosu ball out on the court? They have their place, but if you look at basketball, you're dealing with a lot of like hand checking, shoulder checking, like elbows, like hips to hips. So to me, the greatest way to like train that mobility is to get perturbations, and I like water because they have to control it, and whenever they don't, the water is going to go where they aren't, right? And so
yeah,
now they have to understand how to catch it, or they have to understand how to move their feet, move their ankles, or like utilize their hips to control this specific athlete like in a deeper range of motion. He's like, oh, I've never done this, and I kid you not, like we didn't track it, But me and my AT and the guy at the end of the year, he's like, I don't know what, but like I wasn't falling down as much this year. I'm like, oh wow, that's crazy. It worked. And then like he was on an E10 and he went and he signed a two way. I'm not being like, oh, I'm this crazy mobility guy who knows how to fix everything. But
Yeah.
to me, if you can correlate it to what their game is like, it's going to help them immensely because again, it's like that bind, it's that sense of autonomy. It's like I'm not just going to give you this cookie cutter program. Like I'll go watch film on you and I'll tell you, "Hey, you have issues going like a right step back to the left." Right? Like you pull the shot a lot, but you're not creating a lot of separation. So why is that? Is because we don't have the dorsiflexion? Is it because again we don't have hip internal rotation at the right side? Or maybe you're better uh, going blow bys to the right versus the left. Okay, well, is it the other thing? Can you push off your left big toe? Can you push off your right big toe? Do you have or do you have external rotation? Are your glutes tight so that you can't even access that external rotation when you get there? Like you have it, but you can't use it. And so I'll tell them this is how we can work with you so that now when you press, you're still in that position, but now we're actually activating the musculature and we're getting explosion out of the hip. And so
Yeah.
by just understanding the game and being able to talk to the athlete about it, I think it helps so much because then they'll say again when they're on the court, "Oh man, I never blow by guys on the left, and I was getting the rack on the left side today." It's like, okay, well, look, if we like this, it works, and I could not be making an appreciable like degree of motion difference, right? Like if you got out a goniometer, he might not have anymore, but also the fact that he feels it and his performance is
Yeah.
going up is the biggest metric that there is out there, especially in the G League, where guys are like, they need to perform in order to get called up, or else you might get cut.
Yeah, that's such an amazing way to look at it because I'll be 100% transparent. If we had a guy who just kept falling down, I'd be like, yeah, the guy just falls down.
Yeah,
I don't know what you want me to do.
right.
It sucks, So I mean, you made me a better coach now because now it's like, okay, let's actually look at the ways that we can help influence this. So, all right, now's my time to be selfish. So I apologize to the listeners, but hopefully they can get something out of this too. Do you have some good resources for kind of that translational mobility, like things that you have seen or have helped you to apply the mobility to the court?
Yeah. So like one thing, I mean, I kind of look of like global, local, global. So like first I'll see how the movement looks. Like somebody that I like using through this is I've used a lot of like PJF, Mr. Do It Moving stuff, like Mike Guevara, and also like I've created a lot of movements myself just because I think that that's what's going to help. And then it's like, okay, well, if it is a hip internal rotation thing, if we do truly need to like learn how to activate it in the shortened or lengthened position, okay, well, now maybe I'm going to look at static stretching. Now maybe I'm going to look at like banded mobility or even like I'll go FRC. And when we go on the roads, basketball players' hips are always tight. Like
Yep.
they always are, especially when we get off a flight. So I always host an optional mobility session. They've become somewhat of a thing in Delaware, but they're in the treatment room and I'm in there for like 30 minutes. We just go pails and rails, passive range holds, passive range liftoffs, hovers. And I get these guys to really fire their hip internal, external rotators, depending if that's what they need. If it's like a dorsiflexion, plantar flexion thing, I can just put everybody in their position and say, all right, 2 minute timer. We're stretching. All right, two. If you're in Dorsey and you're on a slant board, now you're gassing up. If you're in external rotation, you're driving that lateral malleolus into the ground. And then I'll
Yeah.
pick people up and we'll work locally. And then after, I'll usually get like super bands or something. And then we'll work on like, I'll put you in a different position. Maybe you're doing ankle pumps. Maybe you're doing uh, like some calf ISOs. But for the hips, like, I mean, I'll take you through my whole routine. Like we do hips, pails, and rails for internal, external rotation for both right and left hips. So there's 4 sets. And then we'll go passive range holds, passive range liftoffs, and then hovers. Then I'll get a super band and I'll wrap it around their shoulder, backpack, pull it, and I'll have them get into a split squat. I'll say, let that band pull your shoulder over that front knee. So we're getting into hip internal rotation, and now we're coming out. We have 10 reps. All right, we'll do that each side. Now let's go into a wide stance, right? And we'll go, it's like I don't know what the actual name for the move is, but I want you to sit in your hip and drag your fingers across the ground and shift from hip to hip. So we've gone sagittal, now we've gone more of a frontal plane basis. And then lastly, I'll say point your toes out. Let's drop as deep as we can, put our elbows in and try to hit each knee to the ground. So now we're hitting a little bit more of a transverse plane. So I try to hit all three planes after we've activated in the shorten and lengthen position. And a lot of guys feel really good after. I mean, I've done it myself. It feels
Yeah.
really good. You almost feel too loose after you do FRC to a certain degree, like to a
Oh
fault.
yeah.
Like, if you've done it for maybe just one time, but it's just stuff like that to kind of, again, the guys feel it. They're like, damn, I feel really good. Or like, I went up to my room and my hips were going crazy. I'm like, yeah, like it was 20 minutes, but it makes a big difference because all you're going to do is go up to your room and play your PlayStation anyway.
Yep, yep, no, 100%. It always cracks me up as the guys coming in. Hey, can I get a little extra mobility work coming in? And they come in, they're like, "Yeah, I feel great today."
Right.
And I'm like, "Yeah, all right, they're crazy. I
Yeah.
don't know."
But I guess I'd say that's like my one cookie cutter program,
Yeah,
because when you work with a certain demographic, like either women basketball players, male basketball players, you notice that a lot of players complain about the same thing. Oh, coach,
mm,
my back hurts. I'm like, yeah, you're tall, but also your hip internal rotation looks like crap. So a lot of people have hip impingements, or if they have horrible hip internal rotation, they're going to have some lumbar soreness because now they're, asking their lumbar spine to be mobile when it's supposed to be one of the more stable joints. It's
mhm.
like the classic when you can talk to a guy, right? If your ankle doesn't move, where do you think you're going to get movement that's going to happen to your ankle? It's probably going to come from your knee. Your knee's supposed to be a
Yep,
stable joint. If your knee doesn't move well, then you're going to ask for stability from your hip. But now that hip is supposed to be a mobile joint, right? And then you
yeah,
can kind of just go up the chain, like we learned this in school. And a lot of guys like that, I've noticed clicks with a lot of guys. They're like, oh, my ankle like mobility does suck and my knees always hurt. I'm like, well, okay,
yeah. There you go.
it's like right, like now
Might be
we're
something to this.
exactly
Yeah.
right. Maybe we know what we're talking about.
Yeah. Yeah, that's my number one joke. So, hey, I might know one or two things,
Yeah,
maybe just a little bit, and then if they ever go too overboard with the compliments, it's always, I'm just a guy,
yeah,
I'm just a
right,
guy. So
exactly.
awesome. Well, Alex, dude, thank you so much. I mean, seriously, this is been really enjoyable to speak with you, and I'm sure the listeners have loved everything. Again, I'll preface this: don't inundate them with a bunch of DMs asking, "Hey, how are you?" every day. But what are the socials that are people can best reach you at or follow you on?
Yeah, just my Instagram at translational_training. That's pretty much the only social I use. I have a burner Twitter account, but it's basically for proposing fantasy football trades and just looking at random stuff. So I don't
Oh,
utilize
that's
that
awesome.
one.
Yeah, right now I put up Bijan Robinson on the trade block today, and it's brutal out
Oh,
there. So yeah,
high
yeah, no,
value,
nothing
high
good whatsoever.
value right now.
High value, I know, but my team sucks, and I need a little
Yeah,
bit more depth. So,
there you go. There you go.
awesome. Well, Alex, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Connor. This was a blast, man.
All right, absolutely.